They did it with 50 loads of mass timber and built the building 8 months faster. Good combination. Here's the killer combination. Because it was lighter, they could put 2 more floors on it. So they call them flats instead of condos or apartments or whatever. He's like, yeah, I got 8 more flats per floor. They sold for $2 million a piece. My math is looking really pretty good on this building right now because that was a bonus.
Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Build, the podcast where innovation meets collaboration in the world of construction. We bring together thought leaders and industry experts to explore the cutting-edge ideas transforming construction equipment, supply chains, building materials, and workforce productivity.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by Faro, the revolutionary last-mile logistics platform, redefining how high-value, time-sensitive construction deliveries get done. Need it fast? Need it right? Faro.
Hey everyone, today we are joined by Arnie Didier, the CEO and principal of Forest Business Network, a leader in the forest products industry with more than 39 years of experience. Arnie has been a key figure in the mass timber construction industry, leading efforts to promote sustainability and efficiency through innovative building materials. As the CEO of the International Mass Timber Conference, he also played a pivotal role in advancing the dialogue on the environmental and economic benefits of mass timber. Today, we'll be diving into how mass timber is transforming construction, from reducing operational costs to increasing efficiency in construction logistics, and how leadership in the industry is evolving. Arnie, welcome to Beyond the Build.
Thank you for having me. You did a great job.
Scott, I can kind of answer your question with regards to Arnie, because Arnie, from my understanding,
more than what he's got on his LinkedIn post.
Right. This has been like lumber has been in your blood for a very long time.
Yeah.
That's kind of how that's literally what you went to school for. That's the industry you went into, and that's where you're at today.
Yep.
Unpack a little bit of that for us.
Sure. Yeah.
Was there a reason for it, and why did you stay?
Yeah, so it doesn't happen very often that, what you go to college for, per se, you stay in for your whole career. But for me, it's been a blessing. I grew up on a farm. My dad was in the trucking business. My next door neighbor was my uncle who ran a farm. They still do. So I grew up in Illinois. And then I went to school at Southern Illinois University, specifically for forest management with a wood science specialization. I went down there originally to play baseball. That's why I picked it, but it was a good fit because that's what I wanted to do and get into. It changed, gradually as my career went. But when I got out of college, I went to work for Georgia Pacific. And Georgia Pacific was a large producer of building products, lumber in particular, but other products as well. They're a large landowner, and they had a distribution business, and that's what I was involved in. So my whole career has been built around building products, and in particular lumber, and then it gravitated to engineered lumber and mass timber. So
now I'm curious because from the layman side of the business, right? Construction lumber's been around for many moons, right? Like all houses, whether they're log cabins or just standard residential, it takes wood to build things, right? And then as we progressed, there was concrete, there's steel. Obviously, they come with their strengths and also their weaknesses. But from like the layman's, how do you differentiate between, the Forest Service, meaning, I have to say this, but I don't have a lot of tact, right? Environmental friendly, tree hugging kind of let's plant stuff and not cut anything down, to no, there's actually a way and a science to do this where the forest rejuvenates itself. We need these products to elevate and grow. Explain to some of the viewers who might have one perspective other than the other, this is what we're really trying to do.
It's a great question, and it's a big question, but yeah, lumber in particular, wood products are the ultimate green product, right? So I said that I was from a farming background. It's just a different rotation length. If you're growing sweet corn in Illinois, your rotation length starts in June and ends in the, September when you harvest it. Lumber is a little bit different. And what's happened that most people don't realize, we actually have more timber on the surface of the U.S. than we did 100 years ago. Most people don't know that, but that's the reality behind it. But a lot of it is not being managed as well as it could be. So in the West, where I'm from Montana, we're dealing with catastrophic fires on a yearly basis. A lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of that is derived from lack of management in the woods. And so what's happened is all of a sudden, the wood people in the forest industry, which I've been involved in my whole career, we've become kind of popular. And we've become popular in the last few years because of mass timber's kind of gravitation to the regular people. They're hearing about it. They're seeing it. When you walk into a wood building, there's just something about it. And then there's a lot of environmental benefits that come from it. Concrete and steel are great products, very supportive of those products, but they come at the building product process a little bit differently. And, when you think of lumber, I'll give an example. We host the biggest conference in the world every year in Portland, Oregon. And when you think about that, we bring lots of different opinions on the stage, experts in all different fields. But as an example, we had the head of forestry for the Nature Conservancy at the time was on stage, along with some other folks, developers and this and that. And what he said, which was interesting to a lot of the audience, was, we don't mind cutting down trees. We actually advocate for it, as long as you don't turn that into a parking lot next. If you replant the trees, regrow the trees, and there's a lot to be said about that. So there's a lot of energy around proper forest management, and it's interesting to hear where the dialogue's gone to. And for regular people, I think you would understand this maybe a little bit better. But one of the folks, his name's Russ Vaughan. He's been in the wood business his entire life. His family's from the wood business. They run sawmills, and then he runs a company called Vaughan Timbers in the mass timber business. But he has talked about how the product is forest health. One of the byproducts is cross-laminated timber, glulam, dimension lumber. But you need management to grow and responsibly harvest the timber, and then you get a really good outcome going forward. That's really what the buzz is about right now in the world of mass timber.
Interesting. Yeah, it's something that I think has kind of gotten around to a lot of folks with regards to management. Is, you go back to Smokey the Bear, prevent wildfires. And the idea was, or forest fires at that point, it was prevent all fires. And just how wrong we ended up being, because it seemed so intuitive. Like, hey, there's a fire, we should go stop it. And then we stopped all the fires. We allowed all the undergrowth to get overgrown, all the little trees to grow up and not get burned out in what they usually would be kind of, in that purge cycle. And then we had these ultra dense forests where the trees are just way too close together, just like building houses too close together. And then now we get these superstorms that not only destroy the forests, which doesn't happen all the time with a normal fire, but it's getting so hot that it is decimating the topsoil, so that it's very difficult for things to grow there in the future. Is that all, still kind of the understanding?
Catastrophic fire is when you, and I'm not the scientist of this, although it's my background, but when you sterilize the soil, that can be a really bad thing, and that comes from it be such a hot fire. Fire is a great tool. It's been used for centuries as a tool. Native Americans used it as a tool to grow healthy forest. And, the Forest Service gets a bad rap for some things. We've all done things that were maybe not exactly the way it should have been handled. The Forest Service is a partner of ours. We work together. We wouldn't be in this movement without them. They led with their jaw when this wasn't a popular topic, and it's actually, as I've talked about in the past, when I think of mass timber, that encompasses a lot of products. But in reality, mass timber is a very, very minor part of the utilization of the fiber in the world, but it gets 98% of the press. So it's gotten in front of a lot of people. The tech businesses have embraced, utilizing wood products for their buildings going forward. And that's a huge step. When you get people not like me, I'm up here, a short, fat guy that's a lumber guy that put his kids through college, in the wood business. I'm a little bit less believable than somebody, the development manager for Google, saying, hey, we really like mass timber and we agree with the story that we're hearing and we want to be part of that, whether it's Microsoft or Google or Facebook or Amazon. All of them have embraced mass timber, quite candidly, and it's really exciting to see.
Do you think that adoption is coming from, number one, the aesthetics? Obviously, you can make beautiful products with glue lambs in different configurations. Or do you think they are leaning into the carbon footprint and going, look, we're saving the planet, it's getting hotter, oceans are going, or is it, from a building standpoint, like you probably know, where your structural foundations don't have to be as strong because now the weight distribution stuff, like, what do you think is really driving the behavior?
All three, so, in the past several years, and it's waned a little bit, but the ESG requirements to hit certain things. So in the tech building case, most people don't understand it or know that they didn't own their own buildings for the most part as of about 10 years ago. And they decided to change that because they wanted buildings that they felt were doing what they're corporately were saying. And what they found is by building them out of wood, they met a lot of those requirements. But to answer your point, Scott, it has to make cost efficient buildings. So that has to be part of the equation. And what we're finding is, as we're getting better at building mass timber buildings and designing them using wood, they're getting more and more cost effective. That's part one. Part two is you've got the aesthetic part, and then anecdotally, you're hearing lots of thought processes around being in a wood building rather than, kind of concrete and steel to an extent. And it's one of the reasons why you're seeing the movement both in the States, but in Europe, to build schools out of wood. The learning environment that it creates and that healthy environment, you kind of think of the log homes or those, you just kind of feel good going into them. But it's nothing new. Think of the churches of the past, right? Hundreds and hundreds of years old that have these big glulam beams. So mass timber isn't new, but you're starting to see some of the technology being used. Cross-laminated timber is being brought up, basically plies of wood that go together that you can utilize small diameter timber, 2x4, 2x6, and even smaller in some cases to build something really strong. And then to answer your other question about the weight, strength and weight ratios are really, really good when you look at CLT and DLT, dowel laminated timber and others, and then glulam beams and that combination. And you're finding some real sweet spots with hybrid buildings, with utilizing concrete and steel and then utilizing wood products into design and coming up with some really incredible buildings.
Yeah, that reminds me of my I have a backyard project that I designed the backyard, this nice big awning that we made, and I was deciding whether to go with steel for this big 35-foot span because I wanted it unbroken with no pillars holding it up. So I was thinking going steel. And I was talking to my dad, an engineer. He's a structural engineer, been an engineer for 45 plus years, and I had him do the specs on it, and he's like, you know what? You should really consider doing a camber beam on this. I think it would look really cool and it would be more cost effective. And I just remember having that conversation with him. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's a glue lam beam made out of 2x6s, strong as hell, and it was definitely the right choice.
Yeah, it brings character to it. I remember, like, I had a hot minute help building houses and stuff, and we would do long spans where people wanted to open up walls and stuff like that. We were just a bunch of manual grunts, and we're like, okay, we're gonna have to get some material lifts in here, or we're gonna have to pick it up using, brute strength. And there's a big difference between trying to get a steel beam in there or a glue lam and stuff like that. So just from an installation process as well. I mean, this is smaller scale, right? Residential type of things, but as you get to commercial stuff, it's a whole nother game where, you got cranes on site and you got, forklifts and stuff like that. So they're probably going, how do we get it in here as efficiently, as cost effective as possible and as fast as possible so we can continue to top off the project?
And that's a really good point. The speed of delivery is very intriguing, and you're seeing case studies of buildings being built utilizing mass timber and prefabrication. And the next generation is really coming to the modular buildings and the residential buildings. Residential buildings today use a lot of glue lams, engineered building products, I-joists, those kind of things. But you're starting to see an advent of even more and more of that with labor shortages and those kind of things. There's a lot of movement around workforce housing, dignified housing for people that need housing on a affordable basis. And you're seeing some pretty intriguing projects. There's one kind of in my backyard in Big Sky, Montana, that was done by the Kolesnikoff family. They have a producing company in Lone Pine, and others were involved, but they put up about 120 workforce housing units that are modularized, came in way under budget, came in way faster than they thought. And they're really dignified, beautiful places because of the natural products that are being used. And we're seeing a lot of movement towards that, and talking a lot about it, but it's real. It's becoming more and more real every day.
Real quick too, just for some of the listeners that might not know, can you give us a breakdown and unpack mass timber from like a 7th grade level?
Sure. So think of mass timber as engineered wood products. So in the business, you refer to that as EWP, engineered wood products, which just sounds like it is. You're utilizing smaller diameter timber and then using an engineering process, GEP. You were talking about your dad being an engineer. These really smart engineers are figuring out processes to utilize smaller pieces of wood to build really efficient, dynamic, strong products. Cross-laminated timber can be produced, 10-foot wide, 60-foot long, 3, 5, 7 ply deep. And then you're seeing glue lams, which were referred to earlier, could be 2x4, 2x6, 2x8, glue lam beams. There's incredible things that can be done when the engineering process is laid on top of the manufacturing process. And then they look at that, and these manufacturers are becoming more and more efficient on how to utilize fiber. And that's an exciting piece. And there's other things that go with that. It might be wood fill insulation. It might be other products like that. But that's where the utilization of a manufacturer becomes more and more efficient, because you're utilizing products that can do this. And then when you think about that, one of the first things people think about is, what about fire? Well, when you look at the actual studies, you think of a big piece. Yeah, you start a small piece of kindling, it starts, but there's a char rating on those beams And when you talk to actually people in the fire code world, in the firemen, and we've had multiple of those people speak at our conference over the last 10 years, they tell you that wood is very, very kind of science driven. You can tell what it's going to do, where some other products you don't know and they collapse. But wood chars and really creates that environment. But it's not, nothing's perfect out there, but there's a lot of things leading to why people are gravitating towards wood products. But again, mass timber is just a name that encompasses a lot of things. It might be glulam beams, it might be cross-laminated timber, it might be engineered I-beams. It's just kind of a grouping name that we kind of came up with a little over 10 years ago. Yeah.
And it's not stuff that's available at Home Depot, right? This is different, like specialized product.
It's starting to, though. So you're seeing a product called micro CLTs, which is essentially like a plywood product. If you think of plywood that's used, and you see OSB has taken over a lot of plywood, but you're seeing that, and that's kind of a next evolution, because regular home builders are starting to use what would be termed cross-laminated timber, but micro CLTs. So you're starting to see that being stocked in those places. The other product that's regularly available at lumber yards or Home Depots is glulam beams. They're for headers and for other products.
Yeah. Those are the ones that kind of look like I-beams, right?
Yeah,
Or is it-
Roseboro
Mhm.
has a big market share of residential glulam beams. And then you hear of like Truss Joist or Boise Cascade that produces other products like I-joists. And those are available at lumber yards, and that's where those are distributed through. But yeah, to your point, Scott, the big panels, it's kind of specialized and they're project driven. And you're seeing big projects. I don't know if you're familiar with one of the biggest in the world right now is it's all occupied now. It's in downtown Milwaukee, Wisconsin, called the Ascent Building. And that's a 25-story mass timber building. So, that new land development, Tim and Boris Gokman came to us with that idea several years ago. And we thought they were crazy, and they weren't. And they're really smart, and they're big developers. And now you got multiple projects around the world doing those kind of things. But that's kind of a showcase right in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as just one example. Other examples of buildings going on. The new Walmart. So this is Walmart, the new Walmart headquarters, 350-acre campus in Bentonville, Arkansas, is predominantly all mass timber. And they're choosing that because they like the environmental footprint that it brings. They like the speed of delivery. They like what it brings to their workforce. Those are just examples. There's multiple examples that you think of, weird ones that you wouldn't think of. Adidas. So their headquarters in Portland, Oregon, 2 mass timber buildings. And when we talk to them, so, a lumber guy, right? You're talking to people from Adidas and big time, investment type people. And they're saying, well, and I'm asking the question, well, why mass timber? And one of their biggest reasons was to attract talent. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, we like to look for talent like Stephen Curry or LeBron James. Yeah, that talent. But when we're hiring people, we want to hire the best marketing people, the best IT people, the best sales people, the best design engineers. And they want to work in a really cool, comfortable building. Well, that office is a really cool, comfortable building. And then right next to it is a 5-story workout facility, all mass timber. So, you got gyms and soccer fields and all this surrounded by mass timber. So you find them in these incredible places that are kind of going globally. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's like making it cool again, right? And I think of any good product as the product speaks for itself, right? We've already explained, the environmental piece, the low carbon, and all the benefits of it. But, telling a good story behind it, right? Because let's call spade a spade. People are driven by their emotions, right? So if I get to work in a really cool, office building that's eco-friendly, right? And we start educating them. And I want to go back to your piece about the timber in the United States. Like, people need to understand and enlighten themselves to be like, this is not the evil bulldozer that's going into the rainforest and cutting down all this vegetation. And now look at what we're going to do. Like, continue to unpack just for the listeners too. Like, you mentioned, I can't exactly how you stated it, but we have more timber on the ground in the United States. And, we look at what politics saying, like, oh, we have a tariff with Canada. We have to bring in timber here. And, like, again, the emotions take over and logic gets kind of shit to the side. So, like, give us a little understanding from someone that's in the business that understands the details rather than someone that's just going, oh, I heard a news clip.
Yeah, it's not perfect for sure. We're guilty of things in our past, in the lumber business itself, just like lots of other people are guilty of past sins per se. But in reality, there's long-term sustainability in the wood products business is regrowing your next crops, right? Per se. And what we're seeing is outside folks are taking a look at what we are doing and giving validation to what we've been saying is, hey, this is a great renewable resource that we have the ability to manage even better and get better at what it's going to do. Is it good for wildlife? Is it good for the watershed? Is it good to limit catastrophic fires? And, you look at, you mentioned the tariff I'll just mention that a little bit, but, you look at Canada and the US. Well, a big majority of the production of lumber in the United States is owned by the Canadian companies in the Southeast. So, they saw that coming and, there's reasons for it. There's been some catastrophic things happening in the woods, the beetle kill and the amount of dead standing timber, those kind of things that are caused by a lot of stuff that's going on environmentally. But when you look at it from a perspective of how do you get the forest health, which is that ultimate prize, right? How do you get better forest health? Part of that is management. Part of it is there's some set-aside areas. Part of it is using, prescribed burns as a part of a management technique. Part of it is taking timber out. But a lot of those rural economies really get a boost when a production facility comes into that particular market that's utilizing timber that maybe didn't have as much value as before. And then you take the engineering process and blend that together. And then, you've got, it's not just me saying it, it's people leading going forward. You'll see things like, data centers. Everybody's hearing about data centers. What's going on with data centers? Well, when you look at data centers, the first large scale one that's been done in mass timber, and it's going to be all of them going forward, is Microsoft. They just did it. The first large scale warehouse, there's several of them, but the first large scale one that was just finished was done by Amazon in Indiana. So Facebook is committed to using mass timber going forward on their data centers. Why is that? What you talked about before, Scott, speed of delivery. What are the aesthetics? What is the environmental footprint? So when big companies like this that have a lot to lose if they make bad decisions are validating, hey, if done right, and you can show the process right, and you're doing things that make sense for the forest health, and come out with great buildings that make sense economically and physically and just that feeling when you walk in the building, there's a lot to be said about when people are actually doing it and they believe it, and it's not coming from me who benefits maybe from the industry itself. So
Does the industry see an uptick in labor for it? Because I'm thinking like, okay, everybody's trying to figure out what their next career move is, right? Do you see this industry, your industry, booming? Prime example, like my brother just relocated to Idaho, and I went up towards the Boise area, and I mean, the building is just unbelievable. The infrastructure is trying to catch up. But then the first thing I said was like, all these people are moving here. Like, where's the work? Are they going to be a bunch of firefighters? Are they going to be a bunch of civil servants? Like, what are we doing? So your industry, are people gravitating to, whether it's forest management, whether it's sawmills, whether it's, different aspects of this industry? Do you see an influx of new participants?
it's a great question. And so I've been in business for 40 years now, a variety of businesses, but all in the building products industry. So what my business partner, his name is Craig Rawlings. He's 50 plus years in the industry. His family's built multiple sawmills. We've been in the construction industry, this and that. And what Craig would tell you is entrepreneurs win the day. So if you're a subsidized business that's taking government fat, you're not long in the tooth generally. But if you're an entrepreneur figuring out how to become part of that supply chain, an integral part, you got a good chance at winning. And so what we've seen in the short term, the last 5, 6, 8 years in the mass timber world, is we're seeing entrepreneurs step in. So you're seeing companies like, I'll give Timber Labs as an example, which is owned by Swinnerton. Swinnerton's a large contracting, $4 or $5 billion. Timber Labs has quickly become a mass timber industry itself. So what are they doing? They started with building a team of mass timber experts, engineers, architects, technology folks, all those kind of folks to build that team. And then they've gradually changed to becoming a remanufacturer of timber products. So they bring in CLT panels, use CNC machines and other things to modify that to fit buildings. What's the next step? Building their own factory, which they're building currently right now, opening another remanufacturing company. That's just one example. I mentioned Kolesnikov earlier. They're an old-time family lumber mill that took a risk going into the mass timber building, particularly making cross-laminated timber and glulams. What has that led to? Oh, they just opened and are running a factory that's building modular mass timber units that I talked about earlier, where you can plug and play and do these incredible designed communities per se out of modular facilities. So that
life-size Lincoln logs.
Yeah, you're seeing more and more. So to answer your question, Scott, it's creating that energy around it. So what do you need to do that? You need people that are experts using wood and timber. Our universities strayed away from that. Now they're coming and embracing it. So you're seeing Clemson, University of Arkansas, Oregon State, Washington University, those kind of really high-level universities embracing programs around mass timber engineering, mass timber architecture, which also lends itself to, hey, you need really good foresters. You need forest engineers. You need those kind of people. So it's kind of creating some really intriguing demand. And I've got nieces and nephews that are into the engineering field, and I'm telling them, hey, you want if the hottest commodity right now coming out of school is engineering. You think of AI, well, that's a great place to be. And quite honestly, people that are experts in utilization of wood are really, really sought after. They get soaked up immediately. So it's a really area that can play itself into it well going down the future, because it's just starting. We're not even on the we're not even up that boomerang yet. It's really just starting to grow. The projections are pretty dynamic when you look at them.
What are some of the new tools or systems or processes that you've had some exposure to with, your pretty deep network that you're most excited about? Like what's out there that is, you mentioned entrepreneurs, and I think that Scott and I would both agree with you that that's where a lot of cool innovation's happening. So what are you seeing that, whether you can, I'd love it if you can shout out whoever you talk about, like you did with Timberland. Um, but is there any other like up and coming technology tool process that is like particularly like going to change the game in your perspective?
That's a good question. And, one of the things, Scott, or maybe it was JP asked about it earlier, is it new? Is it not new? And you think of glulam beams, right? Cathedrals, we've spent a bit of time in Europe, and you can see these old buildings, incredible, right? And new buildings. And so you think about that and put that kind of placeholder. A lot of people think of Europe as the kind of founder of really, really intricate uses of wood. Austria comes to mind, kind of the birthplace of it. And that is very true. And the folks in Europe are incredible craftsmen. Their factories are like, you go into a factory and it's like going into a beautiful, intricate piece of equipment. There's not dust, there's not this. The people that work there are different styles. You still have some manual labor, but they're engineers, they're entrepreneurs, they're thinking outside the box, they're computer experts. And that technology is coming into North America, and we're taking it to next levels. So when you ask about that, there's just some really marquee companies that come from the wood industry. You think of the Homad Group, which is Caliso is part of that. And then you think of Ledinek, and then domestically, the USNR folks and SCM and Costa Sanders. When you have the opportunity to go to what I would call the new version of a lumber mill and a mass timber mill now, it's quite extraordinary. It uses a lot less labor. Robotics is a big part of that. You go into, so Freers is a company based in Oregon. They're a long-time, multi-generational wood products family, right? But they got some big brass ones, and Tyler and Kyle put in their own money and their family money, and they created a product called MPP. It's mass plywood. So you guys know, most people would know what plywood looks like. Well, this can go 24 inches deep, 10-foot wide, 48-foot long. The strength characteristics are off the chart. But you go into their facility, and it's robotics moving those things. So you ask about where are this technology is coming from. It's coming from really smart engineers that look at, maybe, think of building a car or building a computer or building a phone. We're not as complicated as that, but we need that level of engineering to be precise. And one of the strengths of building in wood is you can get really, really precise with wood products. It's right on. It's concrete. You've got, God bless them, they're part of our conference. We need concrete people too. We need steel people too. But wood products is exact. You mentioned Lincoln Logs. Think of building a house. We're seeing houses being put up in 3 days. 3 days. It's just incredible what these smart people are looking at. And we think of affordable housing and the dignity that we owe our veterans and people that need help. And think of if you could give them dignity, and they come into their house and it's wood and it's feels right and it's affordable and you can put it up really fast. That to me gets me really energized. And, what can we do go forward through smart people figuring that out? So there's a lot of companies in that space. We're blessed, not to be an infomercial, but, we host this conference in Portland, and this is the 10th year coming up. And so March 31st to April 2nd, it's the 10th year. We've seen it from literally 23 booths in the basement of a hotel. Actually, it was the parking garage of the hotel, to now the entire Oregon Convention Center. And we're actually building buildings in
Right.
exhibit
For
hall.
the convention.
It's
That's cool.
insane where
Yeah.
it's come from. But what's cool about it is my business partner, Craig Rawlings, my other business partner, Tom Waddell, it's our dream come true that we have all of these people talking together. And that's what's unique about the wood business. They all share ideas. They try to get better together. I was just on the phone. I never thought this would ever happen. I'm on the phone with the heads of Meta, of Facebook, and Amazon, and Microsoft, and then we're taking them in the woods. We did all that stuff, but they're talking about sharing ideas so they can build buildings better. How cool is that? And then you see construction folks and developers talking about how can we do it better, and doing joint projects. Pretty incredible to see the dynamics of it. It's really heartfelt.
We had a guest prior to, I've heard of a company called Boxable. They're, I think, out of Vegas. And, that's kind of like the affordable housing where you can kind of wreck it, deliver it to the site, put it up. But what you were saying about, the universities adopting, God bless the people with big hearts and big ideas. But it sounds like what's happening is we're taking those, what I would call previous sit-ins, right, where we took signs and ideas and we don't probably put a lot of action to it, to now starting to do innovative things, is saying, how do we move this industry forward? How do we educate people past just the signs and the emotions, but actually start doing things to elevate industries? And as you mentioned, we're getting better, we're getting smarter, right? We're evolving, with whether it's robotics or different process. But one of the things that comes to my mind too is, we talked about the wood product, but what's the most affordable and practical way to move these engineered pieces? I mean, is it rail car? Is it still old school CDL trucking? I mean, how do you move these big, massive, pieces of wood and, to scale when you're doing multiple on one? How do they do it from the sawmill to the job site?
Yeah. Logistics has always been a big part of the lumber industry. So, the majority of the lumber products in the United States, North America, I'll speak to, is shipped via rail. Okay. So from the manufacturing facility to the lumber yard, and then to a reload, and then put on trucks and shipped where needed. In mass timber's case, that typically the big projects, like that I've mentioned some of those in the past, those would be produced at a facility and then manufactured and engineered specifically ready to go on the job site. So those are done at the manufacturing facilities. Some of them are even, to the next extent, they're pre-stained. They're ready to go. So then you come from a logistics background. There are a variety of ways to move that freight to the job site. And it goes in and it's unloaded and brought in. But I'll give one example, and this dates myself. This is a guy, Andrew Waugh is his name. He's an architect, so it kind of changed our world several years ago when he was our keynote. He would probably appreciate me telling this story because we've kind of become buddies. He's this good-looking guy, dresses nice and all this other stuff, and very good speaker. He doesn't stumble on himself like myself. He's just great. So he's in front of this audience, and this is a few years ago when we weren't as big. We'll have like 3,500 people this year. We started at 500 and continued to grow. But this is several years ago. But he talked about a building that he built in downtown London that normally would be built out of concrete and steel. And it was going to take about, and I'm just going to guess, but I'll give you an estimate, 400 loads of concrete. Well, they did it with 50 loads of mass timber and built the building 8 months faster. Good combination. Here's the killer combination. Because it was lighter, they could put 2 more floors on it. So they call them flats instead of condos or apartments or whatever. He's like, yeah, I got 8 more flats per floor. They sold for $2 million a piece. My math is looking really pretty good on this building right now because that was a bonus, right? I'm simplifying it. But what it told me was, through efficiency and looking at things differently, and you got to start at the beginning. That's why there's so much collaboration. These lumber manufacturers, the mass timber manufacturers, if you talk to them, they never thought they would be sitting with architects, engineers, developers, economic developers, money people at the table because they just want to produce lumber. But now it's all got to start at the production facility. And then you talk about logistics. Doing logistics properly is really important. And some of these projects are big. It's a la that Lincoln log. You got to start with the back in mind and then build your way forward. But scientists, AI's stepped in a big way on how to coordinate that. So they're all using those techniques, but it's pretty mind-boggling. And, me and my business partner, Craig, and Tom's more on the tech side, but we're like, this is fantastic. God's put us in his place, and we're just very fortunate for it that at the tail end of our career, per se, of 40, in his case, 50 years in the wood business, we're seeing people that actually like us, and that we're making an impact on people. And I always think of it as, what do my daughters think? I've got a 31-year-old daughter, Katie, and a 29-year-old daughter, Emma. They're both married. Katie has my grandson, Phoenix. What would they say? What are they going to tell their friends? Oh, your old man's cutting down trees. He's a lumber whore or whatever. But no, they're talking about, boy, he's involved in the process. His product is forest health, and it just happens to be an end product of workforce housing in Big Sky, Montana, veterans housing in Missoula, Montana, a new headquarters for Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas. I mean, those are things I never expected, but we're seeing that come forward, and it's pretty exciting in the construction industry.
We're what you call the sage, the sage stage of life in a man's life. As I talked about in previous podcasts, the 6 stages of a man's life. The tail end is sage like Solomon, where you can put that wisdom. But when you started the story out, he was like, I think I'm going to date myself. Thought you were going to be like, so I had a couple horses, and it's like, no, but there's a lot of just amazing things. And one thing that you said too, that we do on the technology side, and a preference, I'm a construction guy. I was in the equipment industry. I do not know anything about tech, but what ends up happening a lot of times is companies will build a process and or a product from the beginning rather than going to their end user and say, well, what do you want? Like, for instance, you said lumber. Didn't think that we get architects and engineers. Like, we're like, hey, we cut a tree, we produce some sticks. You guys figure it out with what we have to produce, rather than looking at it from a reverse engineering perspective and going, what are you trying to create? And let us look at our tools and resources of how we can get you a better product. So it's really just like with any company, start from the perspective of your end user, keep them in their lanes, right? Because you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but start building products, resources, and systems around what they're asking for, rather than you sitting in a echo chamber going, "Oh, we know exactly what our customers want. We're going to produce this," and then you get it to them, and they're like, "You know, what'd be really cool is if it did this and this," and you're looking at each other like, "We could have totally did that. Why didn't we do that?" Well, because we all know better. You're like, "No, we don't." Eventually, apparently.
Who
So I
who
like
could
that
teach us
reverse
to
engineering.
build the best schools in the world? Teachers.
What's that? Yeah.
Who
Oh,
can
yeah.
teach us, right? The teachers. Who can tell us the best kind of churches we need in the world? The pastor, right? Or and the attendees, right? So, you think of it in that regard is, and that's what happened in the schools that they're doing. They took that knowledge and they're bringing it forward. And how do we create a learning environment that's pretty dynamic and healthy and all those things? And it lends itself to wood products, which is really exciting for us. And again, go back to that product, forest health, hike, hunt, fish, great water systems, all of those things that we know we all need, but we got to do something about, and it takes action. And you mentioned that earlier, and I think of a lady, her name's Pat Layton. She's kind of like the matriarch of mass timber. She's the head of the department at Clemson University. That she wanted to build a mass timber building on and Clemson University. This is a few years back. Pushback, 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 pushback. She had the strong will. Now they're on their fourth building. MIT's built multiple. Harvard's built multiple. University of Arkansas. Look them up. It's unbelievable the learning environments that they're creating because they're starting with the end in mind. To your point, Scott, and yeah, I get excited about it because it gets all tied in. And yeah, we're just kind of a conduit for that. But never thought we'd be in this situation to be putting ourselves in a topic I mean, we're on Good Morning America. We're on the Wall Street Journal, let alone the New York Times, which is scary in itself, but talking about mass timber, who would have ever thought that they would be doing that? But you got some showcase projects that really bring it to the table. But these next evolutions are going to really be cool. And it's entrepreneurs, to your question, JP. That's what's going to win the day, right? People figuring it out, how to take those next steps. It's pretty inviting. And they're getting better and better at it.
Yeah. And to kind of pivot into, you're really organically getting into leadership. Like, what are the qualities that you're seeing right now within the industry leaders that you think are playing the most pivotal role in these changes, in this progress?
Yeah, we've seen people. I mentioned Pat Layton at a university level, or Peter McKeith down at Arkansas. Those are people that saw the vision and lived the vision. And you've got, just some pretty Chris Evans, the CEO or president of Timber Lab, the subsidiary of Swinnerton, young, smart, sees the vision. You're seeing other folks, kind of on the outside. Emily Dawson, who's just looking at this. She's an architect, but embraced the kind of feel of timber and then wood products and smart utilization. She's doing a startup in Portland, Oregon on wood fiber walls mixed with concrete, some great ideas. So, people like that, Erica Spiritos, these young, smart women that are stepping up into their field. You're seeing a lot of that emerge in mass timber. And what was kind of funny is, so the lumber industry, you think of Weyerhaeuser or Sierra Pacific and these big companies, all run by old fat white guys, right? And I'll never forget at one of our conferences, there's like, these guys they're pretty well heeled financially, right? They've been through it. They've been through everything, right? And they're sitting in the back. This guy, Mark Brinkmeyer, who I worked for a period of time, brilliant man, he's created hundreds and hundreds of jobs in the wood products industry. And they're all sitting back there. And they're like, our dreams come true. 50% women at the conference. Speakers from all over the world, people of color up talking about mass timber projects and why wood is cool and all this other stuff. Who would have ever thought it would happen? And now that's what our conference looks like. It's a melting pot of really smart people, but they can sit next to a logger and a truck driver, the people that are figuring out how to get the products to market, next to a developer, next to a money person that's funding a project. Pretty good dynamic when you see that unfold. So you talk about leadership and you just see it every day happening in this little niche business that's kind of becoming really cool to be in.
Yeah, I think with that leadership piece is, for at least me, is I recognize to me that leaders are people that I can trust, right? I mean, I'll follow you just because I'm curious. I trust you enough to follow you around to the next battle because I know you're going to be there for me and I know through your track record. But that melting pot you're talking about, and that's what I really want people to identify. Academia plays a part. But what we're seeing is we can build all the data centers, we can do all the AI, we can push all the innovation in there, but it really comes down to a group effort. Like someone's still got to build that data center. Someone's still got to mill that log. Someone's got to forest that log, right? And if we don't have the truck driver and the engineer and the manufacturer and the installer, like all communicating together and saying like, how do we make each other's life better, right? Not just these silos that only connect at the right time. Like that's that melting pot I think that you're talking about, is getting all the thought leaders in together and figure out who's going to rise to the top, who's going to be the most inspirational, right? Or the most critical in terms of advancing thing. And the group will sit down and be like, you know what? I trust this vision. I trust this individual. I'm willing to take a chance because I'm genuinely inquisitive on what they're going to say and do next. And I want to be a part of it.
You mentioned about what industries are kind of birthing from it. One of the biggest ones is mass timber installers, Carpenters Plus and Kinzall and others that have stepped into that space. And what's pretty mind-boggling is you do a project, they're all nervous about doing the project because it's new to them. And all of a sudden they're like, we can do this. And now they're getting better and better. You come from the logistics background. They're figuring out how to load them. Companies like Roloblast and others are figuring out how to, do solutions, MTC solutions on how to get a crane to be able to lift up a 48-foot long panel and do it safely and all of those things. Those take smart people to figure it out and a lot of collaboration. But, the wood business is unique. I'm going to date myself, but so I started with Georgia Pacific March 10th of 1986. So my 40 years in the business will come in March. And then I, kind of did different things with GP. One of them was buying lumber. So most lumber is traded kind of like stock, except it changes minute to minute, the pricing. But one thing I remember, I used to play baseball, talking to my buddies, we're having a beer and one guy's a stockbroker and one guy's an attorney and I'm a lumber guy, right? Whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I bought a little bit of lumber today. Oh, how much did you buy? Oh, I bought, like $12 million worth. And my buddies are like, you got to be kidding me. How many contracts do you have to sign to do that? Oh, it's all over the phone. It's all word of mouth. So I placed that day, I was 27 years old. I placed $12 million worth of orders, all over the phone. We didn't have fax machines then even. We had fax machines, but barely email, certainly no texting or any electronic stuff. It's done a lot electronically now. But that was all word of mouth. And the prices are changing minute to minute. So you say, I'm going to pay $200. And well, the next time you call, it might be $250, might be $220, it might be $190, whatever it is. But pretty amazing that the lumber business, and it still has that aura about it. It's become more electronic and things like that. And mass timber looks different than that. It doesn't change minute to minute in pricing, but it certainly is affected by the market dynamics. But pretty wild when you look at the building products industry in general and how much trust there is in the industry, how many people of faith there are in the industry as well. It's encouraging to see, but leaders do get born out of new entrepreneurial endeavors, right? And it's just lending itself to that because you're just getting better at. But can we help fix the dilemma of affordable housing? I hope so. Can we help fix the dilemma of veterans not living on the street? I hope so. Can we create jobs that are high paying, that a family can afford to live off of, the income that you're producing? I hope so. And that's becoming real. It's not 5 years down the road, 10 years. It's happening now. Buildings are being built. In 2016, we were looking for buildings to talk about, any kind of building. We had about 30 to choose from. This year, we'll probably had 400 submissions for our 50 speaker slots, maybe 500, and 2,000, 3,000 buildings to choose from. Pretty dynamic. It's 10 years. 10 years is what the conference has been in existence.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
Wood is cool again.
It is. Wood is cool. Yeah. And it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great place to be. Very blessed.
Very
Awesome.
cool.
Well, we're getting close to the end here. I had one more question I wanted to ask, and that's, is there a standout piece of advice that you've received and taken to heart, or is there a piece of advice that if you could give yourself 40 years ago, what would that be? And with the idea of that, someone may be listening that is
like for
considering
Phoenix.
going.
Yeah.
What would you tell Phoenix?
I hear him in the background, actually. I think he's over. He's going to hang out with Grandpa. Faith first. I always start it with that. I'm a firm believer in that, in whatever faith that is, but it starts with that core faith and belief. And that should be the guidepost, in my estimation, the guidepost that can carry you through anything that goes forward. And then, I think of my business partner, Craig Rollins. He's 74 years old, and he's way better at technology than I ever will be. He's embraced AI, all this other stuff, to never stop learning, right? So he's been a mentor to so many people. But one of the things that Craig does so beautifully is he shares. If somebody calls him and reaches out to him, no matter who they are, it's not always what they want to hear, but he's always willing to take the time to share. It's kind of why he's become, this is going to sound strange, but Craig Rollins is the biggest influencer in social media and wood products in the world. He'll post an article, we'll get 30,000 views in 3 hours. It's crazy. We don't monetize that. I guess we do in a sense because we run a conference or whatever. But it's pretty incredible. So the advice would be faith first, and then be willing to share and mentor your ideas, and accept ideas from people outside of you. It's a beautiful thing when that happens. And I'm the recipient of so many people that have touched my life, both in faith and business, and they blend themselves, athletics, whatever else that is. But very blessed to have that happen in my life.
Very cool. Yeah, I say sometimes to our team, it's like, I just want to be the dumbest guy in the room. The people that I learn from. And it's hard sometimes for man when you're a leader, right, to learn how to listen rather than talk. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And then that surrender piece of, leading with humility, being a servant leader. And we talk about in our core values, being unapologetic as well, of just be like, to your point with Craig, hey, you might not like the answer, but I'm genuine, I'm curious, I'm understanding, right? I'm inviting, and then hope that we collaborate to build something better than it was before.
Great place to stop. Scott, Arnie, I want to thank you both for being on. It was awesome to speak with you, and definitely learned a lot. And yeah, just was great having you on.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, everyone, that is a wrap for today's episode of Beyond the Build. We took away some real valuable lessons and insights, and I hope that you did as well.
If you enjoyed this episode, we would ask that you subscribe so you can never miss an update. If you're a thought leader looking to innovate in the construction industry, let's talk. We'd love to connect and hear your thoughts.
You can find Beyond the Build on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, plus anywhere else that you listen. And if you'd like to learn more about how Faro is changing logistics in the construction industry, please visit our website at faronow.com.
Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, be humble, serve others, and make an impact.